Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Safe Simple Sound podcast. I'm your host, Alex, and it's great to have you join me today. Today's episode is inspired by a recent article on our own Safe Simple Sound blog titled Financial Mastery for Professionals: Is Safe Simple Sound Your Path? We're diving deep into what financial mastery really looks like for busy professionals, entrepreneurs, and executives. People like you who excel in their fields but want that same level of strategic control and clarity over their personal finances. The article highlights a couple of really interesting points that resonated with me. First, it paints a picture of what it calls the professional master of finance, someone who, much like in their career, values understanding cash flow deeply, insists on making informed, data-driven decisions, and perhaps surprisingly, really seeks simplicity and efficiency when it comes to managing their wealth, despite handling complexity elsewhere. Second, it draws a clear line connecting this professional mindset directly to our core secured philosophy here at Safe Simple Sound, showing how principles like seizing control, embracing cash flow mastery, and understanding choices align perfectly with what high-achieving professionals need. And that connection is exactly what we're going to explore today, using practical scenarios that many of you might find familiar. We'll break our discussion down into three key areas. First, we'll focus on identifying the professional master of finance mindset. We'll look at scenarios like the successful executive, Bob, who feels his net worth isn't growing as expected despite a high income, and Sam, the entrepreneur feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of their personal finances. We'll explore the telltale signs and the desire for strategic clarity. Next, we'll move into applying the secured philosophy to professional finances. This is where we get really practical. We'll discuss challenges like leveraging complex equity compensation, think stock options and RSUs, effectively, which touches on seizing control and understanding choices. We'll also talk about building a robust financial safety net tailored for high achievers like Chloe the consultant, emphasizing creating a safety net and embracing flexibility. And we'll consider optimizing for long-term compound growth and legacy, like David, the senior executive, hitting on reaping benefits and developing wealth. Finally, we'll wrap up by tackling simplifying complexity, tax, cash flow, and strategy. Here, we'll look at Dr. Evans trying to tame the tax beast common for high earners, a key part of embracing mastery of cash flow, and Priya's quest to streamline a patchwork financial life accumulated over a career, really leaning into that need for simplicity. Throughout our chat, we'll keep coming back to those core Safe Simple Sound principles, making finance feel safe, simple, and sound. Our goal, as always, is to cut through the jargon, empower you with clear insights, and help you build confidence in your financial journey. So whether you're navigating complex compensation, feeling overwhelmed by accounts, or planning for the long haul, I think you'll find valuable takeaways today. Let's get started. Let's start with our first scenario, which we're calling the high-earning professional plateau. Imagine Bob. Bob's a successful executive, pulling in a really strong income, the kind most people would assume sets you up for automatic financial success. But Bob feels stuck. Their net worth isn't climbing the way they expected. Money seems to vanish each month, and those big goals, like maybe retiring a bit early or building significant generational wealth, feel surprisingly far off. Bob's starting to suspect there are inefficiencies, maybe in how cash flows day to day, or perhaps missed opportunities around taxes, or even how their compensation is structured.
Okay, I can picture Bob. It sounds counterintuitive, right? High income, but not high financial progress. I think many people assume one automatically leads to the other.
It's a common assumption, and that's precisely why we're starting here. It highlights that income alone isn't the whole picture. So let's unpack this with a few questions for ourselves and our listeners. First, how closely do you really track where your professional income is actually going each month?
Oof, starting with a tough one. Honestly, probably not as closely as I should. You see the big paycheck come in, you pay the main bills, but the rest, it can get a bit fuzzy. Is that what happens to Bob?
That's often a major factor, Taylor. It connects directly to one of the core traits we see in those professional masters of finance, understanding cash flow. It's not just about having cash flow, it's about mastering it. Without knowing precisely where the money goes, you can't identify leaks, you can't make intentional adjustments, and you certainly can't optimize it. Think of it like a business. No successful company runs without meticulously tracking income and expenses. Your personal finances, especially at higher income levels where there are more moving parts, deserve that same level of clarity.
That's a great point, Sam. Knowing where it goes is the first step, which leads naturally to the second question. Are you consciously aligning your current spending and saving habits with your specific long-term financial aspirations? It's one thing to track, another to act intentionally based on that information.
Okay, so Bob maybe starts tracking and sees, wow, I spend that much on spontaneous weekend trips, but linking that to, say, wanting to retire 5 years early, that feels like the harder part. How do you bridge that gap? Is it just about cutting back?
Cutting back can be part of it, but it's often more about strategic allocation. It's about asking, is this dollar doing the most it can to get me towards goal X? This involves more than just spending less. It touches on maximizing income efficiency and strategic tax planning, concepts mentioned in that reference article. For instance, instead of that extra money just sitting in a low-yield checking account after being saved, is it being directed purposefully? Maybe it's maximizing a tax-advantaged retirement account, paying down high-interest debt strategically, or being invested according to a long-term plan. It's about making active, informed decisions aligned with those future aspirations.
So, if I understand correctly, it's not just about the amount Bob earns, but the purpose and efficiency of every dollar, both coming in and going out. Less about restriction, more about direction.
You've got it, Taylor. Direction and intention. Which brings us to the third question, broadening the lens even further. Beyond salary, how strategically are you thinking about optimizing your entire compensation package for wealth building?
Entire compensation package? You mean like bonuses, stock options, that kind of thing? I guess I thought of those as separate windfalls, not necessarily part of the core strategy.
That's a very common perspective, but it's often where significant opportunities lie hidden, especially for high-earning professionals like Bob. Salary is just one component. Think about bonuses, restricted stock units, stock options, 401 matches, health savings accounts, deferred compensation plans. Even choices in health insurance plans can have financial impacts. Each of these needs to be understood and strategically integrated. Are you managing equity compensation tax efficiently? Are you maximizing employer matches? Are you using benefit structures to your best advantage? This connects to the idea of seizing financial control and understanding financial choices within our secured philosophy. It's about looking at the total picture of resources available to you and making them work together optimally. For Bob, maybe a part of the plateau isn't just cash flow, but suboptimal handling of these other valuable assets.
Great points, Sam. It really highlights that feeling stuck despite a high income, like Bob, often stems from a combination of factors. Maybe not fully mastering cash flow day to day, not consciously aligning actions with long-term goals, and potentially overlooking opportunities within the broader compensation structure.
It paints a clearer picture. It's less about Bob failing and more about potentially missing the specific strategies needed to convert that high income into efficient wealth growth. It requires that professional master of finance mindset we're talking about, being proactive and strategic.
Exactly. It's about shifting from being a passive recipient of income to an active director of your financial resources. So let's recap the key takeaways from Bob's scenario. 1. High income doesn't automatically equal wealth growth. Active management is crucial. 2. Mastering cash flow, truly knowing where your money goes, is foundational. 3. Consciously aligning spending and saving with specific long-term goals provides direction. 4. Optimizing your entire compensation package, not just salary, can unlock significant potential. For our listeners, if any of Bob's situation resonates, here's a concrete first step. Our call to action for this segment. Map out your primary long-term financial goals. Be specific. Then, take an honest look at your current cash flow and spending habits. How well do they actually support or maybe even hinder progress towards those goals? Doing this exercise can be incredibly revealing and the starting point for making more intentional choices. We've talked about why high earners might feel stuck, often because things aren't fully optimized or understood. But sometimes, even when you want to optimize, the sheer complexity of managing everything, different accounts, investments, strategies, can feel completely overwhelming in itself. This brings us perfectly to our next scenario, featuring an entrepreneur who's professionally successful but feels bogged down by their personal financial complexities. Stay with us. We're calling this scenario the overwhelmed entrepreneur. Imagine Sam, not our expert Sam, but a hypothetical Sam. Sam runs a thriving business. They're clearly successful professionally, but behind the scenes, their personal finances feel like a tangled web. Maybe multiple accounts opened over the years, investments made sporadically without a unified strategy, and a real struggle finding financial advice that cuts through the jargon. Sam values efficiency. They have to, running a business, but feels completely bogged down by the complexity of their own money management. Sam, Taylor, thinking about this entrepreneurial profile, my first question is, how much time and mental energy does managing personal finances currently take away from their professional focus?
Oh, I can immediately picture this, Alex. When you're pouring your heart and soul, plus countless hours, into building a business, personal finance can feel like this giant looming task on the to-do list that keeps getting pushed back. It's not just the time it takes, but the mental space it occupies. It probably feels like this background static, this worry that you're dropping the ball somewhere important even while the business is succeeding.
That's incredibly accurate, Taylor. The mental load is significant. For entrepreneurs, the lines between personal and business can sometimes blur, especially early on. Time is their most precious commodity. We see brilliant business minds who simply haven't had the bandwidth, or perhaps the framework, to apply the same strategic thinking to their personal wealth. They might have accumulated various accounts, an old 401 from a previous job, a CPIRA started one year, a brokerage account opened on a whim. Each piece might exist, but managing them cohesively takes dedicated effort they often feel they can't spare.
That makes perfect sense. It's a direct drain on resources that could otherwise fuel the business. This leads perfectly into the next point. For someone like Sam, feeling this time and energy crunch, do you feel confident you understand the why behind your current investment and financial planning choices?
So are we saying it's like Sam might have these different accounts or investments, maybe recommended by different people at different times, but they lack a unifying thread? They couldn't confidently explain why they own this particular fund in that specific account or how it aligns with their long-term goals. This really connects back to that characteristic mentioned in the article we discussed, the desire for informed decision-making. It's not just about having things, but understanding the reasoning.
Precisely. Often what we encounter isn't a strategy, but rather a collection of financial products accumulated over time. Perhaps a decision made sense based on information available then, but there's no ongoing review or integration. Without understanding the why this asset allocation, why this type of account, why this insurance policy, it's impossible to feel truly in control. It breeds uncertainty and makes it harder to make new decisions confidently. You end up just adding more complexity, potentially, rather than refining the strategy.
Right? So it's the lack of a clear why that contributes heavily to that feeling of being overwhelmed and bogged down. Okay, so if that's the problem, let's talk solutions. Thinking about our entrepreneur Sam, what would a simpler financial system look like for them, and what benefits would it bring?
Gosh, for someone juggling a business, simpler sounds like magic. I imagine it means fewer accounts to track, maybe consolidating those old retirement plans, having a clearer picture of everything in one place. Perhaps automated contributions, so it requires less active thought each month. The benefits seem huge. Less stress, obviously, but also maybe more efficiency? Like, are they potentially paying unnecessary fees across all those scattered accounts? Getting that clarity could mean getting back that precious time and mental energy Sam mentioned.
You've hit the key points, Taylor. Simplicity, in this context, isn't about rudimentary finances. It's about elegance and efficiency. It often involves consolidation, yes, bringing orphaned 401s or scattered IRAs under one roof where sensible. It involves automation for savings and investments. It means clear, consolidated reporting, seeing the whole picture easily. And crucially, it involves receiving advice that is straightforward and jargon-free, focusing on the strategy and the why. The reference article highlights embracing simplicity as a key trait of these professional masters of finance. They manage complexity professionally, so they deeply appreciate clarity and efficiency in their personal finances. The benefits are exactly as you said: reduced mental load, increased confidence, potentially lower costs, better alignment with goals, and freeing up bandwidth to focus on their business or other priorities.
Elegance and efficiency. I like that framing, Sam. It's not about dumbing it down, but streamlining it for maximum effectiveness and minimum stress. So, for our listeners who might identify with Sam the entrepreneur, the key takeaways here are: 1. That feeling of financial overwhelm is common, especially when you're focused on building something professionally, and it has real costs in time and mental energy. 2. A big driver of that overwhelm is often not understanding the why behind your financial decisions and structure. 3. Actively seeking simplicity through consolidation, automation, and clear advice isn't settling for less. It's creating a more efficient, robust, and less stressful financial system. And building on that last point, here's a practical action step for anyone feeling a bit like Sam. Identify one area of your finances that feels overly complex or burdensome right now. Just one. And commit to spending even 30 minutes this week researching one potential way to streamline or simplify it. Maybe it's looking into rolling over an old 401, exploring options to automate savings, or just understanding the fee structure of an account you haven't looked at in years. Now, Sam and Taylor just emphasized the importance of understanding the why and the value of clarity. That desire for logical, clear explanations is something we see frequently, especially among professionals who rely on data and analysis in their own fields. That sets us up perfectly for our next scenario, where we'll dive into the mindset of the data-driven decision maker. Stay with us on Safe, Simple, Sound. We're shifting perspectives slightly, but staying within that theme of clarity, focusing on another profile we often see among successful professionals: the data-driven decision maker. Think of someone like Maria. She works in a technical field, maybe engineering or data science, where logic, evidence, and clear cost-benefit analysis are just part of her daily professional toolkit. She wants to apply that same rigorous thinking to her finances.
Okay, I can picture Maria. She probably gets frustrated when things feel fuzzy, like not based on clear numbers or reasoning.
Exactly, Taylor. Maria values understanding the why behind a financial strategy just as much as the what. The challenge she faces, and one we hear often, is that financial advice can sometimes feel like recommendations are presented without a clear breakdown of the underlying assumptions, the potential risks measured against rewards, or a transparent view of all the costs involved. She wants to make informed, truly data-driven choices, but feels she lacks the right framework or perhaps the right kind of conversation with advisors. So let's unpack this. For listeners who might identify with Maria or simply want to become more data-driven themselves, I want to start with a few questions we posed in our outline. Sam, Taylor, jump in. First, when presented with a financial product or strategy, what specific information do you feel you need to be confident in making a decision?
For me, definitely the costs. Not just the obvious fee, but all the costs, hidden or otherwise. And then what's the realistic expectation? Not just the best case scenario, but what happens if things don't go perfectly?
Those are crucial points, Taylor. Maria's mindset aligns perfectly with one of the core characteristics we identified for professional masters of finance in our framework: this deep need for informed decision-making. It goes beyond just fees and returns. It's about understanding the mechanics of the strategy. What assumptions are being made about market growth, inflation, or even your own future income? What are the specific risks? Not just volatility, but liquidity risk, counterparty risk. What's the range of potential outcomes, both positive and negative, and what drives those different outcomes?
That leads right into the second question. How do you currently evaluate the potential risks versus rewards of different financial choices? Is it a gut feeling or something more structured?
Honestly, sometimes it feels like gut feeling, maybe based on past experience or what I've heard, but I'd like it to be more structured. It's hard though, right? Quantifying risk feels tricky.
It can be, but it doesn't have to be impossibly complex. A simple starting point is asking, what has to go right for this to succeed, and what could go wrong, and what would the impact be? Then assigning even rough probabilities helps. For example, comparing two investments. Option A might offer a higher potential return, say 10%, but relies heavily on a specific economic condition holding true. Option B offers a lower potential return, maybe 6%, but is less dependent on any single factor. A data-driven approach weighs not just the 10% versus 6%, but the likelihood of achieving each and the potential loss if things go sideways. It's about understanding the distribution of possible outcomes, not just the single projected number.
So, it's moving beyond just the sticker price or the advertised return to look under the hood at the engine, the assumptions, and the range of possibilities.
Precisely, and understanding the sensitivity. How much does the outcome change if inflation is 1% higher than assumed, or if your income projection is off by 10%? A robust plan shouldn't shatter based on small deviations from the assumptions. Maria, with her technical background, likely does this kind of sensitivity analysis in her work. It's about applying that same rigor to personal finance.
Which brings us to the third question. Are you looking for a financial approach that prioritizes understanding the why as much as the what? It sounds like for Maria, and perhaps many listeners, the answer is a resounding yes.
Absolutely. It builds confidence, right? If I understand why a certain strategy is recommended, how it fits my goals, the assumptions made, the risks acknowledged, I feel much more comfortable committing to it. It feels less like a leap of faith and more like a calculated step. It reminds me of what we discussed about building trust with financial guidance. Transparency is key.
That understanding is empowerment. When you know the why, you're better equipped to ask the right questions, to spot when underlying assumptions might no longer hold true, and to stay the course during market volatility because you understand the long-term rationale. It moves you from being a passive recipient of advice to an active participant in your financial future.
Great points, Sam. So let's quickly recap for listeners resonating with Maria's perspective. Being a data-driven decision maker in finance means 1. Seeking transparency beyond headline numbers, understanding all costs, assumptions, and the mechanics of a strategy. 2. Actively evaluating risk versus reward by considering the range and likelihood of potential outcomes, not just a single projection. 3. Prioritizing the why behind recommendations to build confidence, enable better questioning, and foster informed participation in your own financial plan. It's about wanting that same level of clarity and logical grounding for your finances that you might demand in your professional life. Now, for our listeners, here's a practical takeaway. A little bit of homework, if you will. Reflect on a past financial decision you made. What information was most crucial for you then? And looking back, what information do you wish you'd had or perhaps asked for? Thinking about that can really illuminate what being data-driven means for you personally. Next, we're tackling a scenario many professionals, especially in fields like tech, face: leveraging equity compensation.
It's a critical area, often a significant part of potential wealth, but notoriously complex.
Precisely. So let's paint the picture. Imagine Ben. He works at a tech company, doing well, and he's received significant equity compensation. Maybe a mix of incentive stock options, non-qualified stock options, and restricted stock units. He sees this potential value building up, but he's feeling, well, stuck. He's unsure about the best strategy for exercising options, holding on to stock or selling it. And the big cloud hanging over it all is taxes. Things like the alternative minimum tax or understanding capital gains. Ben wants to seize control of this asset, but first, he needs to truly understand it and how it fits into his bigger financial picture.
That sounds familiar. I have friends who get these grants and they sort of just sit there because they're afraid of making the wrong move or getting hit with a surprise tax bill.
That paralysis is exactly what we want to help people overcome. So let's dive in with those key questions for someone in Ben's shoes. First, what is your current strategy for managing vested and unvested equity compensation? Sam, what do you typically see?
Honestly, Alex, often the strategy is inertia. People wait until options are about to expire, or they react to market news, or maybe a colleague mentions they sold some shares. A truly proactive strategy, considering vesting schedules, potential tax impacts, and overall financial goals, is less common than it should be. Unvested equity, in particular, is often just seen as future money without a concrete plan for when it becomes tangible.
So, wait and see isn't really a strategy, is it? It sounds more like hoping for the best.
It's certainly not an optimal one. Hope isn't a financial plan.
That leads right into the second question. How well do you understand the tax consequences associated with different types of equity and timings? This seems to be a major hurdle.
Absolutely. And the key here is different types and timings. Let's break it down simply. RSUs. When these vest, they generally become taxable income right then, like a bonus paid in stock. Pretty straightforward, usually handled via payroll withholding, but it increases your income for that year. NSOs. When you exercise these, meaning you buy the stock at your grant price, the difference between the grant price and the market price at that moment is typically taxed as ordinary income. Again, immediate tax impact. ISOs. These have potentially favorable tax treatment if you follow specific rules. Exercising them doesn't immediately trigger regular income tax. However, and this is crucial, it can trigger the alternative minimum tax. The AMT is essentially a parallel tax system designed to ensure high earners pay a minimum level of tax. If you exercise ISOs and hold the stock, you might face an AMT liability even if you haven't sold anything.
Okay, wait, AMT. That sounds complicated. So with ISOs, you could exercise, not sell, not get any cash, but still owe potentially significant tax because of this AMT thing.
Precisely. That's a common and often expensive surprise for people exercising ISOs for the first time without proper planning. Understanding the AMT calculation and how exercising ISOs impacts it is fundamental to making an informed decision.
It sounds like ignoring the tax side is like navigating a minefield blindfolded. You might be okay, but the potential for a misstep is huge. And it highlights that understand piece of secured. You can't seize control effectively without understanding these mechanics.
So knowing what you have, RSU, NSO, ISO, is step one, because the tax rules are completely different. And then knowing when you act triggers different tax events.
Exactly, and then there's the holding period. If you hold the stock after exercising, you need to hold it for a specific duration, typically more than a year after exercise and more than 2 years after the original grant date. Selling too early can convert potential capital gains back into ordinary income.
It's a lot of moving parts. Which brings us to the third question. Are you proactively integrating your equity compensation into your overall financial goals and investment strategy? Taylor, how do you see this playing out from the learner perspective? Is it often treated like bonus money on the side?
I think so. Or maybe as a lottery ticket. People might think if the stock goes way up, then I'll figure it out, rather than seeing it as a core part of their current net worth and future planning. Like, how does owning a lot of company stock affect diversification? Or should Ben plan to use exercise stock options to fund a down payment or save for retirement?
That's the critical connection. Equity compensation shouldn't exist in a vacuum. It needs to be viewed within the context of your entire financial life. Key considerations include concentration risk. Holding too much of your net worth in your employer's stock can be very risky. If the company falters, both your job and a large chunk of your investments are hit. A strategy often involves systematically selling vested shares over time to diversify. Goal alignment. As Taylor mentioned, how does this asset help you reach specific goals? If you need cash for a house in 2 years, your exercise and sell strategy will differ greatly from someone focused purely on long-term retirement growth. Cash flow planning. Exercising options, especially NSOs or ISOs triggering AMT, often requires cash upfront for both the purchase and the taxes. You need to plan for that liquidity.
It's about moving from a passive recipient to an active owner and strategist. You need to understand the rules of the game to seize the opportunity effectively and make it work for your broader plan, not against it.
So Ben needs a plan that says, okay, based on my goals, my tax situation, and my risk tolerance, this is how I'll approach exercising my NSOs. This is the plan for my ISOs considering AMT, and this is how I'll manage my RSUs as they vest, likely selling a portion to diversify and cover taxes.
That's the ideal. Yes, a documented strategy reviewed periodically that considers all these factors.
Fantastic breakdown, team. So, for listeners grappling with equity compensation like Ben, the key takeaways are: 1. Know your equity. Understand the specific types you have as their rules and tax implications differ significantly. 2. Taxes matter immensely. Be aware of potential tax triggers like ordinary income upon exercise or vesting, and crucially, the alternative minimum tax impact, especially with ISOs. Don't forget holding periods for capital gains. 3. Develop a proactive strategy. Don't just wait and see. Create a plan based on vesting schedules, expiration dates, your financial goals, and tax implications. Inertia is rarely the best option. 4. Integrate. Don't isolate. View your equity compensation as a core part of your overall financial picture. Consider concentration risk and how exercising or selling aligns with your broader goals like diversification, major purchases, or retirement savings.
It's about taking that potentially confusing benefit and turning it into a controlled, understood asset.
Exactly. Which leads us to our call to action for this segment. If you have equity compensation, your homework is to pull out those plan documents and award letters. Review them. Identify the key dates, understand the types of equity you hold, and try to flag the potential tax triggers associated with each. Get familiar with your specific situation. It's the essential first step to seizing control. Understanding and managing assets like equity is crucial, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. A truly robust financial plan also needs a strong foundation, a safety net to weather storms and seize opportunities. So, next time, we'll dive into exactly that, focusing on create a financial safety net and embrace financial flexibility from our secured framework. We'll meet Chloe, a high-performing consultant with a variable income, and explore how professionals can build resilience and adaptability into their financial lives. Stay tuned for that. Let's consider Chloe. She's a high-performing consultant, which often means her income can be variable, big projects followed by potential downtime. She wants robust reserves, asset protection for her family, and a plan that can pivot if she decides to switch firms or even start her own practice down the line. Sam, this feels like a common situation for many high achievers. Let's start with one of the core questions for Chloe. What steps has she, or should she, have taken to protect her income stream and professional assets from unforeseen events?
That's a critical starting point, Alex. For someone like Chloe, especially with variable income and potential liability in consulting, protection isn't just a nice to have, it's foundational. We're talking about the create a safety net pillar here. The first layer is often robust insurance, specifically high-quality disability insurance tailored to her profession to protect that income stream if she can't work. Depending on her business structure, especially if she considers her own practice, professional liability insurance is also key. Beyond insurance, asset protection strategies might involve structuring her business entity correctly, like an LLC or S-Corp, to separate personal assets from business liabilities.
Okay, insurance makes sense for income protection, but when you mention structuring assets and things like LLCs, that sounds complicated. Is that really necessary if she's just a consultant, maybe working for a big firm now, but thinking about going solo later? Isn't that jumping the gun?
It's about proactive planning, Taylor. While working for a large firm, some protections might be provided, but they often don't cover side ventures or future independent work. Setting up the right structure before you need it is far simpler and more effective than trying to shield assets after a problem arises. Think of it like building the fire escape before the fire. Even simple steps like ensuring personal and business finances are strictly separated can offer a layer of protection. It aligns with embracing simplicity too. Getting the structure right early avoids complex cleanups later.
That's a great analogy, Sam. Proactive protection. So beyond shielding what you have, Chloe also needs resources ready for downtime or new ventures. This brings us to the second question. How much liquidity does she need to maintain, and is it sufficient to handle both emergencies and strategic opportunities? Liquidity meaning accessible cash or near cash assets.
This is always a tough one for me. We hear about emergency funds, 3 to 6 months of expenses. But Chloe's income is variable, and she's not just thinking about emergencies, but opportunities, like maybe investing in her own practice. That feels like it needs more than just a standard emergency fund, right? But then, isn't keeping too much cash just losing potential growth? It feels like a tension there.
You've hit on a key point for high achievers, Taylor. The standard emergency fund is the baseline, the non-negotiable safety net for true unexpected events, covering essential living costs during income disruption. For variable income earners like Chloe, leaning towards the higher end, maybe 6 to 9 months or even more provides crucial peace of mind. But beyond that, we introduce the concept of an opportunity fund. This is separate cash, earmarked specifically for strategic moves, investing in professional development, bridging income gaps during a planned career pivot, or seeding capital for a new venture. This directly ties into embracing financial flexibility. It's about consciously deciding how much dry powder to keep available. Yes, there's an opportunity cost versus investing it, but the cost of missing a key opportunity due to lack of liquidity can be far greater for someone on Chloe's trajectory.
So it's like tiered reserves, basic emergency fund first, then a separate fund for those calculated risks or strategic leaps. I like that framing. It separates survival cash from opportunity cash.
Okay, that distinction helps. Tiered liquidity, so the emergency fund is purely defensive, while the opportunity fund is offensive, allowing you to play offense in your career. That connects back to what we discussed earlier about seizing control. Having the resources lets you make proactive choices.
Exactly. And that leads directly to our final question for Chloe's situation. How adaptable is her current financial plan to potential significant changes in her career path or income level? This is where embracing flexibility really comes into play.
Adaptability is crucial. A rigid plan built solely around her current role at one firm might shatter if she moves or starts her own business. Flexibility is built in several ways: avoiding overly illiquid investments that can't be accessed without huge penalties, ensuring her savings and investment strategy isn't solely reliant on a specific employer's 401k plan, and importantly, regular plan reviews. As Chloe's career thoughts evolve, her financial plan needs to evolve in parallel. For instance, if she's seriously considering starting her own practice, the plan needs to actively build towards that goal, perhaps increasing the opportunity fund target or adjusting investment risk levels.
So it's less about having one perfect plan fixed in stone and more about having a flexible framework that can be adjusted as her life and career change. Like building with Legos instead of carving from stone.
That's a fantastic analogy, Taylor. Legos allow you to rebuild and adapt. A flexible financial framework does the same. It might involve using versatile financial tools, keeping debt manageable to allow for income fluctuations, and revisiting goals and strategies annually or whenever a significant career event is on the horizon.
Excellent. So let's quickly recap the key takeaways for professionals like Chloe looking to build that safety net and embrace flexibility. First, proactive protection. Don't wait for trouble. Implement robust insurance and consider asset protection structures early on. That's the create a safety net part. Second, tiered liquidity. Build both a solid emergency fund for true crises and a separate opportunity fund to enable strategic career moves. Third, adaptable planning. Design your financial framework with flexibility in mind, using versatile tools and reviewing regularly to align with career shifts. That's embracing financial flexibility. This really underscores how the secured philosophy isn't just about numbers. It's about creating a financial life that supports your professional ambitions and provides peace of mind. For our listeners, especially those in demanding professions with variable income or who anticipate career changes, here's your call to action for this segment. Assess your current emergency fund. Is it truly adequate for your situation? And review your insurance coverage, specifically disability and any relevant professional liability. Are there gaps that need addressing to truly secure your foundation? Coming up next, we'll shift our focus from building the safety net to optimizing for the long haul. We'll meet David, a senior executive thinking about maximizing growth during peak earning years and planning for legacy. David is a senior executive, likely at or nearing his peak earning years. He's got a substantial income, which is great, but his focus now is shifting. He wants to make sure that income isn't just sitting there, but actively working to generate serious long-term compound growth. And beyond that, he's beginning to consider his legacy, how to structure his wealth effectively for his family, future generations, or perhaps causes he cares about. This really speaks to the reap and develop parts of secured, reaping the benefits of compound growth and developing wealth and legacy. So Sam, Taylor, let's dive into David's situation. My first thought goes straight to maximizing that high income. Sam, for someone like David, are investment strategies specifically optimized for their high income bracket and long-term growth objectives, typically different from standard approaches?
Absolutely, Alex. It's not just about investing more money, it's about investing differently. When you're in a higher income bracket, tax efficiency becomes paramount. A strategy that looks great on paper, pre-tax, might be significantly less effective for David once taxes are factored in. So optimization means actively considering tax implications. Think asset location, tax loss harvesting, and potentially incorporating investments that offer preferential tax treatment. It's about maximizing the net after-tax return to really fuel that compound growth engine. This ties directly into the reap benefits of compound growth pillar, making sure high income translates into maximum sustainable wealth building.
Okay, that makes sense. So, it's not just picking good stocks or funds, but strategically placing them and managing them to minimize the tax bite along the way, because that bite is bigger for someone like David. Is that the core difference?
That's a huge part of it, Taylor. The higher your marginal tax rate, the more valuable each dollar saved on taxes becomes, especially when compounded over decades. Think of taxes as friction on your growth engine. For high earners, that friction is higher, so reducing it becomes a key part of the optimization strategy.
That leads right into my next question. Beyond the types of investments, how are people like David typically leveraging tax-advantaged accounts and strategies to maximize that compounding effect? We often talk about maxing out your 401, but does it go beyond that for high earners?
It definitely should. Maxing out pre-tax contributions to a 401 or similar employer plan is usually step one, as it reduces current taxable income. But then you look further. Are they eligible for and utilizing backdoor Roth IRA contributions if their income phases them out of direct contributions? Does their employer plan offer after-tax contributions that can potentially be converted to Roth, the so-called mega backdoor Roth? Is a health savings account being maximized not just for health expenses, but as a triple tax-advantaged investment vehicle? For some executives, non-qualified deferred compensation plans might be part of the mix. And as mentioned in one of our client perspectives in the article, strategically structured permanent life insurance can sometimes play a role for tax-deferred growth and tax-free access later, particularly for legacy goals. It's about using every available tool designed to shelter growth from taxes.
Wow, okay. So it's like a multi-layered approach. Max the obvious stuff like the 401, then look for these other avenues like backdoor Roths, HSAs as investments. It sounds like it requires really knowing the rules and options available. This reminds me a bit of our discussion on equity compensation. Understanding the specific rules and tax implications is key to actually seizing the value, like we talked about with the seize pillar. Here, it's about reaping the maximum benefit by knowing the landscape.
Precisely, Taylor. You've got it. It requires proactive planning, not just passive participation.
And that proactive planning extends beyond personal accumulation, right? David's also starting to think about legacy. Sam, how early should someone in David's position start planning for how they want their wealth to transition and what kind of legacy they want to build? Is peak earning age the right time, or is it too soon?
It's definitely not too soon to start thinking about it and defining the goals. The Develop Wealth and Legacy pillar isn't just about complex legal structures. It starts with intent. What does David want his wealth to achieve after he's gone, or even during his later years? Support family, fund education for grandchildren, create a philanthropic impact. Establishing these goals is the crucial first step. Peak earning years are actually an ideal time to start structuring things because you have maximum resources and potentially a longer time horizon for strategies like gifting or setting up trusts to work efficiently. Waiting until retirement might mean fewer options or less time for tax-efficient strategies to mature.
So the develop part isn't just about writing a will right before you retire. It's more about defining the purpose of the wealth you're building while you're building it, and then starting to put pieces in place, maybe simpler things first that align with that purpose, like maybe setting up 529s for grandkids or starting a donor-advised fund for charitable giving.
Exactly. It can start relatively simply and become more sophisticated as needed. Defining the why behind the wealth helps inform the how of structuring it. Do you need basic estate documents or more complex trusts for asset protection, tax minimization, or controlling distributions over generations? Do you want to involve family in philanthropic decisions? Starting the conversation and planning during peak earning years allows for a more thoughtful, integrated, and often more tax-efficient approach to building that lasting legacy, whether it's multi-generational wealth or significant charitable impact.
That's a fantastic perspective, Sam. It really frames legacy planning not as an afterthought, but as an integral part of the wealth building journey itself. Okay, let's quickly summarize the key takeaways for someone like David, focusing on reap and develop. First, high earners need investment strategies optimized for their tax bracket to maximize net after-tax growth. It's not just about gross returns. Second, fully leverage all available tax-advantaged accounts and strategies, 401s, backdoor Roths, HSAs, potentially others, to maximize tax-sheltered compounding. And third, legacy planning isn't just for later. Start defining goals during peak earning years to allow for more thoughtful, integrated, and tax-efficient structuring, whether for family or philanthropy. Great discussion. And for our listeners who might be in a similar position to David or aspire to be, a practical step inspired by this is to review your current investment allocation. Ask yourself, is it truly aligned with maximizing long-term, tax-efficient growth, considering your income level and goals? It's a crucial check-in. Now, Sam, you mentioned tax efficiency multiple times, both for growth and legacy. It seems like for high earners, proactive tax management is a recurring theme across almost all financial decisions.
It absolutely is, Alex. It's woven into compensation decisions, investment strategy, cash flow management, and legacy planning.
That's the perfect segue, because in our next segment, we're going to tackle that head on. We'll dive into the embrace mastery of cash flow pillar again, but specifically through the lens of tax planning for high earners, looking at Dr. Evans' scenario of trying to tame the tax beast. Stay with us. Let's discuss the scenario, taming the tax beast for high earners, which ties directly into that pillar of our secured philosophy we discussed, embrace mastery of cash flow. We're looking at this through the lens of Dr. Evans, who runs a successful private practice. Great income, which is fantastic, but also a significant tax burden. Dr. Evans feels like they're always reacting to taxes, maybe missing chances to be more strategic.
This is a very common scenario, Alex. Success brings complexity, and tax is often where that complexity feels most acute and potentially costly if not managed proactively.
So let's dive into that proactive element. For Dr. Evans and many listeners in similar high-earning professional situations, I want to start with a few key questions we outlined. First, do you have a proactive year-round tax strategy, or is it primarily addressed only at tax time?
That hits home. I think for a lot of people, myself included sometimes, taxes feel like this thing you brace for in March or April. Proactive sounds good, but what does that actually look like in practice day to day or month to month? Is it just setting aside money?
Setting aside money is crucial for cash flow, Taylor, but proactive strategy is more than that. It means thinking about taxes as decisions are being made throughout the year. For Dr. Evans, it could mean evaluating the tax impact of buying new equipment before the purchase, not just documenting it afterwards. It means reviewing income and expenses mid-year to project tax liability and make adjustments, perhaps shifting certain deductions or income if feasible and advantageous. It's about seeing tax planning not as an annual event, but as an integrated part of financial management.
So it's shifting from tax preparation, documenting the past, to tax planning, shaping the future. This really connects back to that idea from the reference article about mastering cash flow. You can't master it if a huge chunk is unpredictably flying out the door for taxes you didn't plan for.
Precisely, which leads naturally into your second question, Alex.
Right? Question 2. Are you confident you're utilizing all relevant tax deductions and credits available to you as a professional or business owner? Dr. Evans runs a practice that likely opens up specific opportunities.
Okay, deductions. We hear about standard deductions versus itemizing, but for someone like Dr. Evans with a practice, it must go deeper. What kind of things might get missed?
It can range from the simple to the complex. Simple might be ensuring all legitimate business expenses are tracked, professional dues, continuing education, specific types of insurance, office supplies. More complex examples for Dr. Evans could involve optimizing retirement plan contributions. Are they using a standard CPIRA, or could a solo 401 or even a defined benefit plan allow for larger tax-deductible contributions based on their income and goals? There are also industry-specific credits or deductions sometimes. And crucially, ensuring the timing of expenses or income recognition is optimized where possible. Missing these isn't just leaving money on the table, it's inefficient cash flow management.
It sounds like knowing what's possible is the first step. It's not about finding shady loopholes. It's about understanding the legitimate structure of the tax code and how it applies to your specific professional situation.
That makes sense. So it's not just about if you have deductions, but which ones are most impactful and are you maximizing them correctly? This reminds me of what we discussed about understanding the why behind financial choices, really knowing the mechanics.
Absolutely. And that strategic thinking extends to the fundamental setup. Which brings us to the third question. How does your current business structure impact your overall tax liability, and have you explored alternatives?
Business structure, like being a sole proprietor versus an LLC or an S Corp, right? I know people talk about that, but how big a difference can it really make for taxes for someone like Dr. Evans?
It can be significant, Taylor. A sole proprietor reports business income directly on their personal tax return. An S Corp, while often more complex administratively, allows the owner to take a portion of the profits as a salary and potentially take the rest as distributions, which aren't subject to self-employment taxes. There are rules around reasonable compensation for the salary, but for a high-earning practice like Dr. Evans, the potential tax savings on distributions can be substantial. An LLC offers liability protection and can often choose how it's taxed, perhaps as a sole proprietorship, partnership, or even electing S Corp status. The optimal structure depends heavily on the specific income level, state regulations, business goals, and administrative capacity.
So, the way the business is legally structured isn't just a legal decision, it's a fundamental tax and financial planning decision. It sounds like Dr. Evans feeling reactive might stem from operating under a structure that was right when they started, but perhaps isn't optimal now that the practice is so successful.
So, if I understand correctly, being proactive means planning year-round, knowing all your potential deductions and credits, and ensuring your business structure itself is optimized for your current situation. Putting those together could seriously change how much cash flow Dr. Evans actually keeps.
That's the core idea. It's about shifting from defense, just paying the tax bill, to offense. Strategically structuring things to legally minimize that bill and maximize the cash flow available for saving, investing, or other goals. It aligns perfectly with the Embrace Mastery of Cash Flow principle.
Fantastic summary, Sam and Taylor. For professionals like Dr. Evans, taming the tax beast isn't about magic tricks, it's about strategic, informed planning. Key takeaways from this segment. Shift from reactive to proactive. Tax planning should be a year-round activity integrated with financial decisions, not just an annual filing event. Know your deductions and credits. High earners, especially business owners, often have specific opportunities beyond standard deductions. Understanding and utilizing these is key to optimizing cash flow. Structure matters. Your business entity has significant tax implications. Regularly evaluating if your structure is optimal for your current income and goals is crucial. If you're listening and feel like Dr. Evans, successful but perhaps reactive on the tax front, The clear call to action here is to consult with a tax professional who truly understands your specific industry or profession. They can help you explore these optimization strategies tailored to your unique situation. Let's now deal with a different kind of complexity, not necessarily one complex thing, but rather the complexity that comes from having many things accumulated over time. Let's talk about Priya. So, Priya's situation is one I think many listeners might relate to. She's had a successful career, worked for several different companies. Along the way, she's collected multiple 401s from past employers, maybe opened an IRA or two, has a brokerage account she started years ago, and various insurance policies. The result? A kind of financial patchwork quilt. She finds it really hard to get a clear, unified picture of her overall financial health, let alone figure out how her investments are actually performing as a whole. She basically wants to hit the simplify button and create a system she can easily understand and manage. This really hits on that embrace simplicity principle we highlighted in the reference article. How professionals, despite handling complex work, often value clarity and straightforwardness in their personal finances. So, thinking about Priya and maybe our listeners' own situations, let me start with a few questions. First, just taking a mental inventory. How many different financial accounts, thinking retirement, investment, insurance, do you currently manage?
Oof. Just hearing that question makes me realize it's probably more than I think if I actually listed them all out. Old 401s I haven't touched. That brokerage account I opened in my 20s? Yeah.
It adds up quickly. And that leads to the second question. Can you easily articulate your overall investment strategy and asset allocation across all those accounts? Like if someone asked, are you 70% stocks, 30% bonds overall? Could you answer confidently?
Honestly, probably not with precision. I know what my current 401 is doing, roughly, and maybe my main brokerage account. But adding in those older ones, it gets fuzzy fast. I might be way more heavily weighted in one area than I intend, just because I haven't looked at the whole picture together. This reminds me of what we discussed earlier about needing a clear view to make informed decisions, the understand financial choices part of secured. If you don't know what you have, how can you make good choices?
That's precisely the issue, Taylor. This lack of a consolidated view is incredibly common. Each account might have made sense individually when it was opened, but over time, without active consolidation or alignment, you end up with what we call financial drift. Your overall allocation, your risk exposure, even your costs can end up being quite different from what you'd consciously choose today.
Okay, so the problem is clear. It's messy, hard to track. Which brings us to the third question. What are the potential benefits? Thinking clarity, maybe cost savings, potentially better performance that someone like Priya might see in consolidating and simplifying her finances. Sam, maybe you can walk us through why simplification isn't just about feeling tidier?
Absolutely. The benefits go far beyond just tidiness, though that mental clarity is valuable in itself. First, true clarity. You get a single, comprehensive view of your assets, liabilities, and overall net worth. This allows for actual strategic planning. You can see your true asset allocation and adjust it according to your goals and risk tolerance. Second, potential cost savings. Older accounts, especially some 401s or retail mutual funds, might have higher administrative fees or fund expense ratios. Consolidating into lower-cost options, perhaps in a single IRA or brokerage account, can save significant money over the long term. Compounding works on fees too, just in the wrong direction. Third, simplified management. Fewer statements, fewer logins, fewer decisions scattered across platforms. This frees up mental energy and time. It makes rebalancing your portfolio much easier. You do it in one place, strategically, instead of tinkering in multiple accounts. Fourth, better performance potential. This isn't guaranteed, but by having a clear strategy applied consistently across your consolidated assets, you're less likely to have redundant holdings or allocations that work against each other. You can implement your desired strategy more effectively. Fifth, easier estate planning. Fewer accounts make it much simpler to manage beneficiary designations and streamline the eventual transfer of assets.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So it's not just about feeling less overwhelmed. There are potentially tangible financial benefits, lower costs, maybe better alignment with your strategy. But are there downsides? Like, are there reasons someone shouldn't consolidate everything? For example, I remember hearing some old 401s might have unique investment options or features.
That's an excellent point, Taylor, and it highlights why this isn't an automatic consolidate everything decision. It requires careful consideration. Unique 401 features. Some older 401 plans, particularly for large companies, might offer access to stable value funds or institutional share classes of mutual funds with extremely low fees that aren't available in a standard IRA. You'd want to compare those specific options before rolling the money out. 400 loan provisions. You can typically only borrow from your current employer's 401. If that's a feature you might value, leaving money in an old 401 won't help. Creditor protection. 401 plans generally offer very strong protection from creditors under federal law. IRA creditor protection varies significantly by state. This can be a crucial factor for some professionals. Rule of 55. If you leave your job in the year you turn 55 or later, you can often take penalty-free distributions from that specific 401. Well, you lose this specific flexibility if you roll it into an IRA before age 59. Consolidation cost fees. While the goal is often to reduce fees, ensure there aren't high transfer fees or costs associated with selling investments in the old accounts before moving.
So, it sounds like the principle of simplification is powerful, but the process requires a bit of due diligence. You need to weigh the benefits of consolidation against any specific advantages you might be giving up by leaving an old account.
Exactly. It's about making an informed choice. For many people, especially if they have multiple old 401s and scattered IRAs, the benefits of consolidating into a single, well-managed IRA or potentially rolling old 401s in their current employer's 401 often outweigh the drawbacks. But you have to look before you leap.
So, if I understand correctly, the first step for someone like Priya, or anyone feeling this way, is really just to know what they have, like building a map before deciding which roads to combine.
Perfectly put, Taylor. Which leads us nicely to our key takeaways and the call to action for this segment. Key takeaways. 1. Accumulated complexity is common. Many professionals end up with a patchwork financial life over time due to career changes. 2. Lack of clarity has costs. This isn't just inconvenient, it hinders strategic decision-making, can hide high fees, and may lead to suboptimal investment allocation. 3. Simplification offers real benefits. Consolidation can lead to greater clarity, potential cost savings, easier management, better strategic alignment, and simpler estate planning. This aligns strongly with the embrace simplicity principle. Number 4. Consolidation requires due diligence. Always check for unique benefits or features in old accounts before making a move. And that brings us to the call to action for our listeners. If Priya's situation resonated with you, here's your homework. List all your financial accounts, retirement accounts, IRAs, etc., brokerage accounts, savings accounts, even insurance policies with cash value. Just get it all down on paper or in a spreadsheet. Once you have that list, start thinking about the potential benefits and drawbacks of consolidating some of them.
That feels like a really manageable first step. Just creating the inventory.
Exactly. Taking that inventory is a fantastic starting point. Getting that clear picture is foundational, laying the groundwork for applying a truly simplified, strategic approach across your entire financial life. It ties back nicely to everything we've discussed under this broader topic of simplifying complexity, from making sense of taxes and cash flow to just getting your arms around everything you own. All right, everyone, that brings us to the end of today's discussion on the Safe, Simple, Sound podcast. We've really unpacked what it means to approach personal finance with the mindset of a professional master, someone who values strategic thinking, data-driven decisions, and perhaps most importantly, clarity and simplicity, just like we discussed in that reference article, Financial Mastery for Professionals. We explored how this mindset shows up in real situations. Maybe you recognized yourself in Bob, the high earner feeling stuck, or Sam, the entrepreneur needing efficiency. We then saw how our secured philosophy directly addresses these professional needs, whether it's seizing control of complex assets like Ben's equity compensation, creating robust safety nets like Chloe, or developing long-term wealth and legacy plans like David. And finally, we touched on simplifying those often complex areas like taxes and scattered accounts, really hitting home that embrace simplicity and embrace mastery of cash flow aren't just slogans, but actionable strategies. I think that scenario of Priya trying to streamline her various accounts is something so many professionals encounter. That desire to move from a patchwork quilt of finances to a clear, consolidated picture. It really highlights the power of aiming for that simple and sound structure. The key takeaway running through all these examples is that achieving financial mastery as a professional is about aligning your financial strategy with the same dedication and strategic thinking you apply to your career. It's about seeking understanding, taking control, and building systems that work for you. Thank you so much for joining me today and lending me your ears. Your time is valuable, and I truly appreciate you spending some of it with us here at Safe Simple Sound. If today's episode resonated with you, I encourage you to visit our show notes. You'll find a link to the original blog article we discussed, as well as links to schedule a consultation if you feel our approach might be right for you. And if you found value in our conversation, please consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform, sharing this episode with a friend or colleague, and hitting that subscribe button so you won't miss our future episodes. We'll be back soon with another discussion designed to help you build financial confidence and clarity. Until then, keep applying that sharp professional mind to your personal finances. This is Alex, reminding you to keep your financial journey safe, simple, and sound. Take care, everyone.